Hi. I feel like this video is just for the people who didn't pay attention the first time. I don't know, I really miss the format of doing monthly wrap-ups. I think because doing them in vlogs sometimes feels so stunted where I only read like a book a week, so I'm basically just vlogging me reviewing one book and then it's very long-winded. For those of you who don't like reading vlogs or you just want to hear the digest of what I felt, or like I said, weren't listening the first time, I think I'm gonna bring back, at least for this month, we'll see, a sit-down wrap-up just for old time's sake. She agrees. So, July. This was the month that I decided to do a dedicated video that ended up being a part 1 and a part 2 that were all about these blind dates with a book that my best friend Shelby got me for my birthday. So all of these, I had no idea what they were. Go watch the vlog if you want to see me unbox them and react. And here's how I felt about them. The first one I opened was Paybacks a Witch by Lana Harper. This is obviously a witchcraft book. I feel like witchcraft is its own genre now. It's so popular. For context, in my Whitneyverse, I am not a fan of witchcraft in books, which is partially why she got me not 1 but 2 books on witchcraft in this little haul. My issue with it is I don't love urban fantasy, and this to me is very similar to that. If people are doing magic in books, I really want it to be a complete fantasy universe. This follows our title character named Emmy, and she moved away from her small town that's full of witches because when she was 17, she and this dude in the town had a breakup that absolutely shattered her, as 17-year-olds do. She got out of there. The town that she's from has 4 main witch families. She is of the one where it's like librarians and book smart people, like the Ravenclaws of the world. And every 50 years there's these challenges that determine which family is going to be like the presiding family or like the most relevant one for the next 50 years. And so the youngest people in those families have to compete. Her bestie, this like unattainable sexy woman that also lives in the town, and her ex are all the 4 children participating in that. Everyone wants to team up on this ex and this dude that's just the worst and has scorned all of them. So it starts a partnership between all of them, and she and Talia, who's like the mysterious like kind of older girl who she always had a crush on in high school but nothing ever came out of it, they start to get closer together based on those events, and they talk more about why Emmy moved away. It's a sapphic romance, and it's in the back set of like she's returning home for the first time in a while, and now there's these challenges. This was blurbed by Emily Henry, and it said it's sexy, so I was really looking forward to this. I do think the writing was pretty when it was talking about locations and describing like the town or really just her reactions to everything, but I thought the dialogue in this needed so much work. It was very overwritten to the point where they did not feel like people, they felt like characters. Every sentence they said was so overwritten, it felt like it wasn't even the same author writing that and the description scenes, because those were so pretty. And I liked the vibes of her just like returning home and like seeing her parents again and being in the bookstore. I really looked forward to the more like normal scenes because the challenges part of it fell a bit flat, mainly because her role in them is to be kind of like the umpire. She was not participating, she was the one leading them. So she was a bit separate from the action, and the way it was written was a bit confusing. That also could be user error because like I said, I don't read witchcraft a lot, but the competitions just felt really low stakes. And I can't get over the idea that like, why do you care so much about a man? Immediate red flag that when you're 17, you're like, I gotta move to Chicago, this dude is so bad. Like, girl, you're 17. Not to downplay anyone's trauma they've been through with men, but he just took up so much of their headspace, and he was just some loser. So I was scratching my head a little bit at that. Overall, I didn't hate this. I also didn't love it. So I ended up giving it like 3.5 stars. Like, it was good. I don't know that I'd recommend it. There's probably, and I say that only because there are so many books in this genre that I probably are 5 stars. Emily Henry lied. It's not sexy. There's one sex scene. It was fade to black. That was very disappointing. I don't know. The relationship was fine. I liked the first half of this book more than the second half, but it was still kind of an easy read. And then I moved on to A Night to Surrender by Tessa Dare, which is the first book in the Spindle Cove series. Last summer, I was very much in my obsession with the Stud Club series, which is a dance with a Duke. This is the first in a series. I didn't realize it was like 6 books. I have heard of this, but never felt compelled from the synopsis to give it a go because it sounds weird, and it does. even when I talk about it, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I sold that well. But it was so good. So hear me out. This one's about a woman named Suzanne, who lives in a seaside town that is known for being like a refuge for women who, you know, when men in England are like, you need to go by the seaside. It's one of those. The town is predominantly women because it's just this institution that's like women going to the seaside to recover from being widowed or needing to like learn manners before getting married off. So Suzanne is like kind of the mayor of this town. She runs the show. She's very confident and strong. The fun part about the whole institution is that on the outside it's like, send your daughter here, we'll reform her. But then once you get there and your parents have gone home, it's like, no, we're actually gonna do slam poetry about how much you hate your husband and we're gonna go swimming. And we like burn all the manners books and use them as like tea trays. So it's also pointing out the flaws in that and how much Suzanne hates that culture, even though she's sort of initiating it. Women ruling the world, it's incredible. But enter our hero. Bram is a recovering soldier who had a really bad knee injury in the war.
Then I took an arrow in the knee.
Set in 1813, so they're at war with France. He is desperate for a new assignment even though he's still recovering from this injury, and so he goes to this town to beg Suzanne's father, who's like an important general in the war who's now there just to be an inventor, for any kind of station, any post, any assignment. And he's like, well, we're a seaside town, France is over there. You want to make me a military so we can defend this town just in case? That begins a really interesting saga of these two really headstrong, opinionated, and stubborn characters being head to head over like, this town is for women, this is our safe place, why are you ruining it? And the men being like, this town is for women, we need to man this up. And so he has to like recruit men to come to this town. And I think it was a really fun exploration of gender stereotypes. The number one thing I come back to is I loved Suzanne as a main character. I think she was so smart and strong and capable, when a lot of women in historical fiction or even just women in books in general can be like caricatures of sassy women. She was also tall and she talked about it all the time, and the male main character talked about it all the time for like, ooh, she's so sexy, look how tall she is. And that was just very validating for me. So that was actually personal. That's not for you, it was for me. I will say the kissing starts off pretty much immediate into this book. And actually a note on their sex life, I don't know what compelled this, but they don't have sex a single time indoors in this book. I also think this makes a really good point about ableism, because this man is recovering from a leg injury, so he's somewhat like using a cane and limping. Probably not using a cane, probably just limping. And so he has to learn that he still has value even if he's not on the front lines and like being productive. And again, I just go back to this book really turns stereotypes up on their heads about like men versus women. It kind of is like a white feminist problem of like, we don't need men in this town, but I digress. For what it is, I thought it was a really fun read, even though you kind of get infuriated at the man for like the way that he thinks and turns the town upside down, but it's redeemed because Suzanne feels the same way as you, so she's there to like put the pressure on him and call him out. So I loved this. I couldn't not give it 5 stars. The rest of the series is in my Amazon cart. I'm very interested in reading on, and it hooks you really nicely because a lot of the side characters in this book, I'm like, where's their story? I'm trying to read about him. I don't know who the other characters beyond the 2 other soldiers that he was with will be about, but I'm highly interested in continuing. Highly recommend. After that began my 3-week saga into taking down Rombreaker. Rombreaker by Victoria Aveyard was one of my most anticipated books of this year after I read Red Queen last year and loved it. I've actually taken this out from the library before and then never got around to it, probably because it's, I don't know, fucking 550 pages. But after I've entered my Lord of the Rings era, which I think I've mentioned every video at this time that I love Lord of the Rings. After I watched those, people told me you have to read this because she says it's based off like Lord of the Rings vibes. I don't know if I want to just take 5 minutes to try and explain what this is about. I'll be very brief. I knew nothing going into it, which I enjoyed, so maybe I'll kind of give that to you. This follows 4 main characters, different ages, mortalities. This is a world where there used to be portals to other worlds called spindles, and someone evil is trying to reopen those and bring in bad things. And so these 4 people have to team together to literally save the world so that it isn't overrun with demons and zombies and all that good stuff. Wow, that actually was quite succinct, and I somehow made that a 5-minute explanation in my reading vlog about this, but that's it. And when I say that's it, I mean that's kind of it. Not a lot happened in this. She was very heavy-handed in writing about the world. I have never, okay, I will caveat this with, I love a map in a book. Okay, I'll be here for days. When she mentioned any city, I'd be like, hold that thought, I'm about to go find it. I love geographically based books. I am the kind of person who flips and looks. If I'm reading this on Kindle, which I did because it's on Kindle Unlimited, so I flipped back and forth. When I'm reading it on Kindle, I get sad that it's hard to read the maps in digital format. So I do love that she made it very world building heavy, but it definitely sacrificed plot, especially knowing how much she is capable of with Red Queen. I loved Red Queen. Red Queen had me sat the entire book. It was addicting. I could predict nothing that was gonna happen. The characters felt really mature for it being YA, and it just blew me away. Like, my expectations were here and the book was up here. Maybe because my expectations for this were up here, that the book's actually here. But the only thing I took away from this was, this has to be a setup for the next books in the series, and I'm relieved that I googled and these books are already all out. I believe it's just a trilogy, which means all the books are out, and I've also heard from commenters now that books 2 and 3 do get better, so maybe this is just a labor of love. We'll see. As you can see from my tabs, I did not enjoy it. I really loved the character dynamics, even though it became a little bit predictable the way that each character behaved, and you knew if a certain thing happened, a certain character would make a jab at this certain character about it. So it fell a little bit into each character had their role, and it was a little bit stereotypical and not as unpredictable and exciting as Red Queen was. But I do think it's setting up some very interesting conflicts with each character and their role in the story, and they have a lot of character development to have, which I think is another strike on this book, is that everything felt pretty static. Because not a lot happened, there wasn't a lot of room for growth. Especially the villains right now feel pretty undeveloped. I'm sure at some point the book explained it, but by the end of the book I kind of forgot why the characters were bad and why they wanted to do what they wanted to do to take down the world. So they felt really one-dimensional because it was like, no one liked me as a kid, so now I need to end the world. It's not a villain that you love to hate. Promo for my book. Anyway, I love books where you not sympathize with the villain, but it's like, yeah, that would have made anyone crazy. But this, I don't really get it. Maybe I'll get it later. And fair warning, no smooching in this. No romance. I can see the way it's setting up to have some, hopefully, but I deserve a I am brave badge because I read a 550-page book with no smooching.
She's so brave.
Anyway, all that being said, thank you, Victoria, for adding to my fantasy repertoire and scratching my Lord of the Rings itch. That sounds like a kind of tapeworm. My ring itch. All right, parasites, go off. Yeah, I gave this like 3.5 stars. I can see it going uphill, but this one left stuff to be desired, mostly having a plot. Alrighty, after that I did my 24-hour readathon with Shelby, which was so fun. I'm honestly really proud of how much I was able to read during that, because I read the entirety of this 400-page literary / historical fiction tall hardback small font book. It is called Horse by Geraldine Brooks. Is anyone here surprised? This is a book I'd only ever seen, and obviously just because this is like cheese and a mousetrap for me, I've been interested in, and so Shelby got this for me. I knew nothing about it, so when she had written like the teasers on the outside of the package, like it's historical fiction, it's set in a dual timeline, like I didn't know anything about what this was gonna be. So this is a book that's set in 2019 and 1850 alternately. The chapters from the past follow a slave named Jarrett, who is the stable hand for this racehorse named, I forgot, hold up, Fake Horse Fan. It's a real horse. Lexington. Yeah, so I guess I kind of gave it away. Like, this is based off of a real horse, real people, real paintings. I'm getting ahead of myself though. The 2019 chapters of this book are set following 2 main characters. One of them is an Australian American who works for the Smithsonian as like their bones expert, like the archaeologist, and also a Nigerian American who is a reporter, so he's writing a story. As you can imagine, this book follows the racehorse. So the historical chapters are all about Jarrett raising the horse and the struggles that he has to go through, like being in his position in society, but also like having to advocate for this horse, and like if he doesn't have this job, he has nothing. Like he's just a worker in the fields. So he fights really to stay by this horse's side, and you get to see the progress of this horse and everything he does. alongside the growth of Jarrett and the experiences that he has that are formative to him. And then the modern chapters are all about these two historians that are looking into the history of this horse and why was he the greatest racehorse of all time. So those alternating chapters are very interesting, and like the characters in 2019 will be like, oh, there was this painting of him that's lost, and then in the old chapters that's like, he did this painting of him and it went with this person. So there was connections that you could make there. Another thing is, in the 2019 perspective, the male main character, who's Nigerian American, frequently experiences like on-page microaggressions and has a lot of internal commentary on race and how he's treated by white people and Americans. So I'll use that as a transition. Feel like I spoke about that very positively, but I'll just caveat everything I said by, this is the author photo. Love the horse, but Geraldine Brooks is a white Australian American writer. So even though I really appreciated learning about the history of a sport that I like, even though if I'm not like specifically interested in horse racing, you know me, I'm a horse girl, I love horses. To learn more about the history of slavery and how closely tied that was to horse racing in the 1800s was very important to me. I think it was well researched. She had good intentions. I for sure would read more about that topic of how much the horse industry was progressed and driven by people who were enslaved. That was a very interesting topic to me, and it's not lost on me that that is an important thing that I need to look into. Big butt coming. But the way that it was written was so pedantic and almost like, here's my experiences. It was like very close third person, talking about like their reactions to racism and how it made them feel. Even in the modern chapters, he would think things like, I hate when white people do that, and oh my god. I agree that white people need to be accountable for racism and know their place in it, but I can't shake the feeling that this was not her story to tell. I would have much preferred to read this from own voices, especially with a modern perspective inserted, because there are so many stories that talk about Black experiences in America, slavery experiences in America, and both of these perspectives were men, and it's written by an Australian white woman. So I was just flabbergasted at what made her think. I'm like, who edited this? Like, who did you have read this? It very much felt like a book for white people, especially because, spoiler alert, not a happy ending. In the modern guys chapter, there's a police brutality instance, and we have so many books on police brutality written by people of color that I just did not think it was a necessary angle to make in a book like this. So I'm very conflicted on this. I do think it was pretty. I get what she was trying to do, but I cannot get over that. I'm like, this was not the place for you to do all that. It feels like a book that was written for white women's book club so they could sit around and be like, that was hard to read. Didn't even know that that happened. It's like, yeah, this is actual people suffering though, so what do you know about that, Geraldine? So yeah, I gave this one 3 stars. Rough transition after that one, but I then read The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling, which is the pen name for Rachel Hawkins, which I didn't know until I was like almost done with this, but I've read, is Erin Hawkins the same one that did Prince Charming and Her Royal Highness? But I loved those. I thought they were super cute. This is actually the sequel to a book called The X-Hex that I have not read, but Shelby said this one was on clearance, so this is what I was gonna get, and I respect that. And I don't need to read a companion series in order. It is about a woman, name Gwen. This book follows Gwen, who lives in a witchy town. She runs like a souvenir gift shop all about the occult. This dude from Wales, who's also a witch, which they called men witches, and I'm like, isn't that wizards? Or is that just J.K. Rowling lore? Like, maybe I need to unlearn that. Anyway, he moves to her small town in Georgia from Wales because his family like had ties there somehow. I don't know, that was book 1 material. He starts setting up a store right across from hers that also sells witchy things, and so it's like a rivals to lovers. She thinks he's really irritating, he's in love with her, and they just instantly have chemistry but pretend they don't. Very typical, but very easy to read. I'm finding that I'm able to more and more like block out the noise of me being like, oh, that was cringy, and still enjoy things, because I'm learning about myself that 3 stars doesn't mean it was terrible. It just means it was okay. It was fun. As you can predict, this one did get 3 stars in that range. The writing was not bad. It was the main character's tone of voice where she just had that like, oh my freaking god kind of thing that I think is pretty typical in romances. So at this point, I'm just kind of tired tired of reading narration styles like that. A bit millennial cringe if you're older Gen Z like me, fair warning here. But what I was not expecting based on the way that this character like internal monologue was the severity of the smut. Because when I turned to the page and he was knee deep in the passenger seat eating her out on page, I went, hello. So that was a very unexpected surprise, but I was happy, obviously. This book took me like 4 hours to read. It was so easy to fly through. Again, if you just need like brain candy is what I call these kinds of books, super easy. I see why people read these kind of witchy romances in the fall time, because it was very Halloween. I read one final book in July, which was not part of this video, so sneak peek. If you don't know, August, which is when you're watching this hopefully, is the plus size readathon. So you can't really see, but I have a TBR lined up here for all the things that I want to read. So ideally I would have the other half of this video be a TBR, but I already have that separate, so go watch that. Anyway, I decided to get a head start on plus size reads because I finished this book with a couple days left before August, which I knew I probably wouldn't finish anything else on my TBR. So I went ahead and picked up a plus size romance book. It was called Owen by L.M. Drew. This is an author who I've read before. She has a werewolf shifter series called One Night in, I don't know how to pronounce it, Gavroche?
Not even close.
So it's a paranormal romance. I thought it was very average, kind of annoying, so I did not have high expectations for Owen, but it is a bear shifter romance. So it's this dude, like a lumberjack, who lives like 2 hours out of town up in the mountains, very solitary, apparently how bears like to be. He comes to town one day and there's a woman there. I forgot her name already. But there's a plus size woman that's new to town because she just wanted to get away from the city. And he sees her and is like, yup. Which I appreciated because her on the cover, she's like realistically bigger rather than like a size 14. And so he looked at her and was like, holy shit, she's so thick, like I need someone who I can, and she's sturdy. To be appreciated that way is very unique and I liked it. But so the whole crux of this book is like, obviously she's a human, she doesn't know he's a bear shifter. The whole bear shifter thing was kind of silly, which I knew going into it, but it really leaned into the silliness because there were scenes where like they needed to get around in the snow. Oh, I'm jumping ahead. He ends up taking her to the cabin because they're about to get snowed in and they wanted to like hang out before they get snowed in. So they have like a week together at their cabin in the middle of nowhere where they do activities. But to get around up in the mountains, he would like transform into a bear, then pull a sleigh with a harness. By the way, it's not lost on me that I'm giggling at it, but this is from one of my favorite movies. The call's coming from inside the house. And it was just so silly. Sometimes you really have to disconnect your logical brain from some of the plot here because I'm just trying to have fun. And they definitely did. This book was very spicy. The quantity of smut was so much. The writing still wasn't my favorite. Nothing stand out there, but I did like it a lot more than the Wolf Shifter series because in that one, she finds out he's a wolf at like 90% of the way into the book and she's like, it's okay, I like you regardless. In this one, she finds out pretty early and it was just a bit more natural. I wish she would just lean into writing fully fantastical worlds where that's normalized so we can skip that whole conversation. But I thought Owen was great, even though he's awkward at the beginning. I'm like, how are you good at dirty talking when you didn't even know how to say hi to a woman 16 pages ago? There's some plot holes here, but obviously I was not criticizing that by the end of the book. Yeah, it was just totally predictable, very sweet. The only conflict there to solve is about the relationship, which I love. I don't want a romance book to have any external conflicts. I don't care about your small business. I don't care that your car broke down. Give me a third act breakup. Okay, maybe not that, but I only want the drama to be about your relationship and not some other shit going on. I don't care about the government in this book. I care about the government in my world. It's enough for all of it. Anyway, I think I gave that one 3 stars as well. There's a sequel. I don't know how interested I am in it, even though it is another plus size main character. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't expect to finish this book in July. I thought I'd start it and then finish it in August so I could be like, here's my first book I read for this readathon. And I read it in like 2 days, so it was addicting. And with that is all my reads for July. Let me know if this was dumb because I've just repeated everything you've already heard, or if you like this format. I liked it, even though my sitting on the floor and filming situation puts you in front of my barest shelves. Whatever. Okie smoky, I'm gonna go say goodbye, Rody. Bye. Goodbye.